In a dominating performance, number 15 Clemson triumphs over Florida State with a final score of 29-13 at Doak Campbell Stadium.
Looking at 2nd and 9 for Clemson. Klubnik with plenty of time. Found his man in the seam. It's caught. Williams, touchdown Clemson.
Phil Mafah was a standout, rushing for 154 yards, including a pivotal 59-yard gain that set up a crucial late touchdown.
Between the tackles, they gash that front. Mafah on the move. Phil Mafah kicking in the turbo and all the way down to the 15.
Quarterback Cade Klubnik completed 19 of 33 passes for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns, while wide receiver Antonio Williams had a breakout game with career highs of 84 receiving yards and 157 all-purpose yards. Defensively, Clemson was relentless, allowing just 22 rushing yards. Linebackers Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz led the chart, 10 tackles each, while Avion Terrell made a key first-quarter interception to give Clemson the momentum. With the victory, head coach Dabo Swinney notched his 174th career win, surpassing Bobby Bowden's conference record on Bobby Bowden Field.
Wilson looks, and the pass on target for a first down to the 35. Boulware suplexes Strickland. Boulware will hit anybody, anytime. And case in point was right there.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 7 of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. For a second week in a row, I am not Drew Archer. I am Matthew Johnson. Drew is still having internet problems in regards to the effects of Hurricane Helene. Our thoughts are still with everybody affected by that tragedy, and hopefully everybody in the path of the new hurricane is going to be safe. But yes, Drew is still without internet. He will be able to this week, though, record some of his thoughts about the Florida State game and give out his picks for this week and upload it. I'll just have to put it in post. So for the most part, this is going to be another solo episode. We could start off with the Week 6 recap, though. The game everybody was talking about, you couldn't get away from it on Saturday. Alabama traveling to Nashville to play Vanderbilt, losing 40-35 1 week after dominating the number 1 team UGA for 3 quarters. Crazy game. I live for this type of chaos. I hope we get to see more of it this season. Also, we had Tennessee, Arkansas. Tennessee goes down 19-14. Arkansas's defense looking really good, and Tennessee's offense maybe not looking as good as we thought they were at the beginning of the season. We also had Auburn travel to Athens to take on Georgia. Georgia holds on there to 31-13. It was a little bit closer than some of us might have thought, but rivalry games, kind of similar to the Clemson game, how that one shook out. UGA just held on there. And lastly, the late night game from Saturday night, Miami versus Cal. Miami barely ekes that one out 39-38. I don't think they are the best team in the ACC right now. They have barely eked out their last 2 wins. They're going to need some help. And if you need some help with your septic tank or plumbing issues, feel free to reach out to our sponsor, Pump Monkey Septic Services. They are owned and operated by Clemson alumni Alan Powell, based in Clemson, but they service the entire upstate all the way down from Walhalla, Seneca, up to Simpsonville, Greenville. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram, and their phone number is 864-710-2211. Once again, that phone number is 864-710-2211. When the dumb's funky, call Pump Monkey. Let's get into the Clemson-Florida State game. Head coach Dabo Swinney mentioned in the intro, but he achieved his 174th career win, breaking Bobby Bowden's ACC record for the most wins by a head coach in the conference. Once again, that did occur on Bobby Bowden Field. With their 102nd all-time win, Clemson surpassed Auburn for the 13th most victories in FBS history. Like I mentioned just a second ago, Auburn went down to Georgia this week, which gave Clemson the advantage. Clemson has now won 4 straight games at Florida State's Doak Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee, a first in series history. Under Dabo Swinney, Clemson has an impressive 135-18 record against teams not ranked in the AP poll, including 112-8 since 2012. Clemson has won 118 of the last 123 games when leading at halftime and boasts an 82-4 record when winning the turnover battle since 2011. Clemson hit exactly 500 yards of offense for the 3rd time this year, marking the first time since 2019 they've reached 500 yards in 3 of 4 games. Tigers have produced at least 400 yards of offense in 4 consecutive games, the first time achieving this feat since 2020. Clemson also surpassed both 200 passing yards and 200 rushing yards in 3 games this season. This week, they did 235 passing and 265 rushing. Clemson limited Florida State to just 22 rushing yards, having held the Seminoles under 25 yards in 5 of their last 10 meetings. Quarterback Cade Klubnik threw for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns while also rushing for 62 yards, showcasing his dual threat ability. Kicker Nolan Hauser made 5 field goals, the first time Clemson has had such a performance since 2011. I believe that was Chandler Catanzaro back then. And Nolan Hauser set a school record for field goal attempts in a game with 7 this week. Obviously, we had 2 of those blocked, and I'm sure both me and Drew will mention that in our personal thoughts about the Florida State game. Clemson has not allowed an opponent to score in the first quarter of any game this season, outscoring teams 90-0 in that period, and that does include the Georgia game in that stat. The Tigers have led at halftime in 80 games since 2017, the most in the nation in that span. Clemson also won the turnover battle this week, improving to 9-1 in their last 10 games when winning that stat. And lastly, wide receiver Antonio Williams recorded a career-high 157 all-purpose yards, marking his first game as a Tiger over 100 all-purpose yards. But personally, I think special teams kept this game close. The scoreboard indicated that the game was a lot closer than it actually was. Like I mentioned, at one, Clemson finished the game with 500 total yards of offense, and I think Florida State was around 200 or just under, yet there was only a 2-possession lead for most of the game. Those 2 blocked field goals really made the difference for the Tigers. The offense moved well, but once they got into scoring position, Florida State's defense really tightened up. The windows of the passing lanes got a little tighter, running lanes were a little smaller, and Clemson had trouble punching it in, finishing off drives. And although the defense did play well, we did give up Florida State's best offensive performance of the year. And the 2 touchdowns that Florida State did score were just really great throws by Brock Glenn. There were a couple outstanding throws that Clemson's defense was in a good position, but the throw was just all in the perfect spot where only the receiver could get it. So good game by Brock Glenn. I think that's very promising if you're a Florida State fan. You know, the DJ years aren't going to be that long for you. I'd like to see the defense keep improving and the offense figure out some more red zone attacks and threats. But overall, a really good game for the Tigers. Let's hop into the Twitter poll of the week.
Twitter polls.
All right, the Twitter poll of the week. Kind of a different type of question here, but the question is, choose your quarterback. Quarterbacks are listed in an order of current Heisman odds per FanDuel. There's 4 quarterbacks. Blind ranking just has their QBR, passing touchdowns, and interception count on the season. Names blocked out. You have to pick. So option A, 85.9 QBR, 11 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Pretty good. Second option is 88.9 QBR, 14 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Third option is 81.7 QBR, 12 passing touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And last option, 87.6 QBR, 13 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Before we get to the listener responses, I'll go ahead and give my thoughts. I kind of am leaning towards that second quarterback. I mean, it's the highest QBR, highest passing numbers, and tied for the lowest interception count. Kind of going to be hard to beat that. So I got the results pulled up from the listener responses. Option A ended with 0% of the vote. Option C ended with 0% of the vote. Second place, option D, with 6% of the vote. And in first place, everybody agreed with me. That is option B with 94% of the vote. One of our most lopsided polls of all time. But with that, we can go ahead and reveal who these players were. So going down the line, we'll start with option A. That is 85.9 QBR, 11 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. That is Jalen Milroe, Alabama's quarterback. He has plus 450 odds right now to win the Heisman. Option 2, 88.9 QBR, 14 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Surprise. Cade Klubnik, plus 1,400 odds right now to win the Heisman, but if you're just looking at stats, He's got to be the favorite in my book. And I mean, I don't know that Cade Klubnik is the best quarterback in the nation. He's playing like it right now, though. And then third option, 81.7 QBR, 12 passing touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That would be Carson Beck, quarterback of Georgia. He's plus 1,800 odds right now to win the Heisman. And the last option, 87.6 QBR, 13 passing touchdowns and 2 interceptions. None other than Jackson Dart, quarterback of Ole Miss, plus 1,800 odds also to win the Heisman, tied with Carson Beck there. So looking good for Cade Klubnik. I'd like to see him continue this little fire streak that he's on.
Fact or fiction?
But with that, we get into fact or fiction. So the first fact or fiction this week, Clemson has had 3 different receiving leaders through 5 games. The wide receiver / tight end room has 2+ more guys capable of being a game's leading receiver. I'm going fact. Obviously, already had 3 different leading receivers through 5 games. The guys I came to my mind, Antonio Williams, Bryant Wisco, Adam Randall, and TJ Moore, all in the wide receiver room alone. That doesn't even include Birdingstool. That's 5 guys that I think could take over a game. And that's not even mentioning like a possible breakout performance from Olsen Henry and or Pat Henry. Olsen Pat Henry, I believe is his name. And then Josh Sapp, the 2 backup tight ends. They've both had flashes so far this year. Fact or fiction, SMU is the 2nd best team in the ACC. I think I got to go fiction on this one. SMU started the season pretty rough, but they have been looking pretty good the last couple of weeks. But I think Clemson and Miami, in that order, are the top 2 ACC teams. SMU probably number 3. I'd like to see them whenever they play Duke and Pitt, the 2 other undefeated ACC teams left. And lastly, I actually sent Drew the suggestion. Clemson would lose to Vanderbilt on a neutral site. I gotta go fact. Vandy has only lost 2 games, both by 1 score and in dramatic fashion. Missed field goal against, was it Missouri a couple weeks ago? And then Georgia State, they lost on a Hail Mary play. They put up a really good fight in all their games, and they just beat Alabama. They were winning by multiple scores for most of the second half. Alabama tried to come back and only lost by 5, but that was the week right after Alabama dominated Georgia for 3 quarters. So I think Vandy is a really good team in a bad situation. They have tough schedule, tough opponents, but future looks kind of bright in Nashville for the first time in a while.
Weekly picks.
Which leads us to the Pick'em contest this week. Not a great week for me again. This is back-to-back weeks of going 1-3. I only hit on my favorite pick, which was Pitt at UNC. Pitt was only favored by 3. Pulled that one out. Missed on underdog Stanford +8 at Virginia Tech. Thought the Clemson over was going to hit with those blocked field goals, and didn't really happen, but that over was 47.5. I also thought the under of Wake Forest NC State was going to hit. That one didn't either. Not much defense played there. Yeah, got to get better, or else this is not going to be fun for me. Drew went 2-2 to bring his season total up to 13, and my one correct answer this past week also brought me up to 13, so that ties the contest on the season. Drew missed on his favorite, kind of funny, Alabama -23 versus Vanderbilt. Didn't happen. Underdog also missed for Drew. He had Mizzou beating Texas A&M, and that one was a blowout also in Texas A&M's favor. He did, although, get the over and under of his picks to hit. SMU versus Louisville, over 57.5, and under USC Minnesota, under 51.5. So decent week for Drew, not a great week for me. Let's hope we can turn that around here. I'll go ahead, since Drew is recording his picks, I'll go through all my picks. Then I'll insert Drew giving his picks. I'm staying home for my favorite this week, going Clemson at Wake Forest. Clemson right now is a 20-point favorite. I don't think Wake Forest is very good. And I want Clemson's offense to continue to improve, finish in the red zone, and it'll be a big week for the Tigers offense. Underdog this week, I am going Penn State at UNC. Penn State is currently favored by 5.5. I like USC to cover that. Penn State hasn't necessarily looked amazing in all of their games so far this year. They haven't really played anybody either. I've been kind of surprised by what I've seen out of Southern Cal this year, so I think they'll keep that one close. I've been burned in the past on Coastal Carolina under, so I'm learning my lesson and going Coastal Carolina at James Madison for my over pick this week. They are plus 60.5 right now, but both of those offenses love to score, so I'm expecting the points to be flowing. And lastly, my under this week is Ole Miss at LSU. That one is 63.5 right now, and both of those offenses are good, but sometimes in those games where the offenses are good, the points just aren't coming as much. So that's my picks for week 7, and I'll send it over to Drew to give off his picks.
What's up, Matthew? What's up, listeners? Appreciate y'all bearing with me as I am still recovering from Hurricane Helene. Very minimal damage in the area that I live with. I'm good. I have power, all of that kind of stuff, but unfortunately still without power. So makes recording a podcast in 2 separate locations a little difficult. But I figured I'd send in a video for my picks this week. Thank you, Matthew, for holding it down the last 2 weeks. I know doing a podcast by yourself is not necessarily always exciting, but here's some my picks for this week. I don't know if Matthew's mentioned it yet, but with my picks last week that he gave out for me, did tie it up for the season win total. So Matthew and I tied heading into this week. This game right here, my favorite. I was supposed to go to this game this weekend, and then just with everything with the hurricane, the damaged roads, all that kind of stuff, we made the decision to not go. But my favorite pick, Florida, Tennessee. Tennessee's a 15.5-point favorite. As I'm recording this on Tuesday, Tennessee's going to bounce back after that loss on the road at Arkansas last week. For my underdog pick, I have USC. They're a 5.5-point favorite, 5.5-point favorite dog at home to Penn State. I don't believe in Penn State, and I think USC can hang with them, not necessarily picking them outright, but I think the Trojans cover. My over pick, Mississippi State and Georgia. Mississippi State is a terrible team. Georgia looking a little sluggish last weekend after the Alabama loss against Auburn. So I look for them to come out swinging this week. And then my under pick, Syracuse at NC State. The over-under is 54.5 there. Can't remember if I mentioned the over for the Mississippi State-Georgia game. That one's 53.5. And then the over-under for Syracuse-NC State, 54.5. So I'm going with that as my under pick. Again, thanks, Matthew, for holding it down. Before I let you go, got a trivia question for you. So this week, Clemson plays Wake Forest, a team that Clemson has not lost to in a very long time. But in the history of this series, the two teams have played 3 games in neutral sites. 2 of those neutral sites were played in Charlotte, North Carolina. Matthew, where was the third neutral site game between these 2 programs played?
I really don't know, but tracking with Drew's former trivia questions about neutral site games, I'm going to say that it was Rock Hill, South Carolina.
The answer, Tokyo. The Tigers and the Deacons played in 1982 in Tokyo. Tigers win 21-17. That was actually Clemson's first of 2 games played in Tokyo. They also defeated Duke in 1991 by a score of 33-21 there. So Tigers, Wake Forest traveled, how many miles separate Clemson and Winston-Salem, but they traveled all the way to Asia to play a game. But again, Matthew, thank you for holding it down. To our listeners, thank y'all for sticking with us through all of this. Hope everybody is safe and getting back to a little bit of normalcy after this hurricane. But look forward to being back on the show, fingers crossed, next week. But we'll review the Wake Forest game and look forward to talking some more Clemson football with y'all very soon. Peace.
All right, let's get into the Clemson-Wake Forest game coming up this week. Overall, Clemson leads the series 71-17-1. Clemson leads the series on the road in Winston-Salem 27-10, and that one tie occurring in Winston-Salem. The last meeting was October 7th, 2023. Clemson won 17-12. Clemson has currently won 15 in a row against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, and Clemson, as I mentioned in my picks, is currently a 20-point favorite. The over-under for the game is at 60.5. That one's going to be interesting to see. I wasn't too sure about picking that for any of my picks, so Wake Forest has beaten Clemson just 7 times in the last 50 years. Dabo Swinney has never lost to Wake Forest as Clemson's head coach. Wake Forest is right now 2-3 on the season, with their 2 wins coming against North Carolina, Agriculture and Tech A&T, and on the road last week against NC State. Tigers are aiming for their 16th straight victory against Wake Forest, marking their longest active winning streak against any FBS team. Clemson has not only achieved multiple winning streaks against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, but it has recorded 3 streaks of 10 or more games against the Demon Deacons. Clemson aims to start 4-0 in conference play for the 10th time under Dabo Swinney, which would mark the Tigers' 19th such start since joining the ACC in 1953. So if Dabo is able to do that, he would have over half of those seasons. Final thoughts for the week, though. Wake hasn't really looked great early on in the season, and I'm looking for Clemson's offense to continue to improve and the defense to continue to hold up. Obviously, I'd like to see the defense to continue to improve, but they've held up and looked pretty good so far throughout the season, given the circumstances. And I'd like to see a shutout here by the defense because I want to see them gain some confidence. The secondary has looked a little vulnerable recently, giving up a lot of pass interference penalties. Just the coverage hasn't been amazing, specifically speaking of like Sherrod Koval. I can't think of any other Clemson DBs right now other than Avion Terrell, but Avion Terrell has played amazing, so I don't want to put him in that basket, but really want to see some improvement this week. Hopefully it's a big confidence builder for the Tigers, and hopefully Clemson keeps rolling, goes to 4-0 in the conference to start the year. But I appreciate you guys bearing with me for another week of a solo episode of Matthew. Hopefully you guys enjoyed getting Drew's thoughts in there occasionally, and hopefully next week all of the technical difficulties of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene have been taken care of, and we can be back to a normal episode. But once again, I appreciate you listening. Thank you for subscribing. We just hit 100 subscribers on YouTube, so very thankful for that. Happy to be growing so quickly on that platform. So we couldn't have done it without you as the listener. So be sure to head over to the YouTube channel if you aren't already and subscribe. Share with a friend who loves Clemson football or college football in general. And we will be back next week to recap this Wake Forest game, and we will talk some ball. Peace.